I'm Jeff O'Neill on Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
It's not often on this program that we get the chance to combine culture and cars so beautifully and so perfectly. And when you talk to Jeff O'Neill, of course, you can talk about cars, which we will. But I want to talk about wine for a minute because on September 14th, the O'Neill Vintners and Distillers, a certified B corporation, was announced that you had been nominated for Wine Enthusiast Person of the Year Wine Star Award. Now, that's just got to be a pinnacle achievement, right, Jeff?
Well, it's certainly fun. I mean, it's a great honor. But I will tell you, the kudos go to my team. The part of the reason we were picked by Wine Enthusiast, largely because a lot of the initiatives we have around sustainability, and the B Corp certification layered on top of all of that. I just feel like we have an obligation as a company, as individuals, to take care of the environment around us, whether it's the soil, the people, wages, fairness. It's just part of our culture.
Part of your culture and the culture that you've helped to create. But I read an article that said that you said that you'd been drinking and smoking cigars all the way through college since you turned 21. And the wine business you gravitated right toward it, right? 1985?
I did, and I will tell you, I still love all of the great things in life: great food, cigars, great wines, spirits, cars. Not necessarily in that order.
Tell me how much the wine business has meant to you.
Well, it's been very important. I started in the early 1980s. Ultimately, I was very lucky with private equity partners in the early days, and then I was able to create my own company in 2004. So we've been very fortunate. It's unique. It was a unique opportunity for me to start from scratch, create the culture that we wanted. We have a line around our company which is no drama,
That's a good one.
and taking care of each other. So that's kind of been the culture. We got to build it from the ground up, and it's been a fun ride.
You've got more than 300 employees now, and you continue to invest in your operational capabilities in order to keep the right talent and grow the business. But one of the things that struck me, Jeff, was that you're one of the fastest growing wineries in California. You sell about 1.8 million 9-liter cases of wine to consumers every year.
We do, Jason, and we really pride ourselves on bringing great wines across the country and making them affordable and reachable to just about everybody. So we have facilities in the Central Valley and Paso Robles and in Sonoma. So we've been, as I said earlier, we've been fortunate, and I think when you take care of your employees, and then B, you take care of the consumer. There's not a huge amount of magic there. If you can over deliver on great wines and quality, the consumer keeps coming back.
I promise the listener that we will focus on cars, but just a couple of more wine questions, okay? This is wine and culture now.
Right.
But when we look at the wine business, what is it that surprised you about it? What was most challenging?
Well, look, it's like a lot of businesses. It's enormously competitive. I gave a talk yesterday to the UC Davis business school, and I called it an overnight success. It only took 40 years. We have some very, very competent people in our industry. I think what has been unique for us is we've been able to pivot as the consumers have changed their taste. We have changed directions with the company, but it's competitive. But we've been able to capture a larger share of the market than most everybody else on the way up. And we think a lot of it's around several issues. One is culture, one is quality, and then we have this just a great environment of giving back. So we do a lot of scholarships, and we encourage education with all of our employees, whether they're a hourly worker pulling hoses that wants to become a winemaker or wants to learn about wine tasting. So we encourage everybody to continue their education at whatever level.
During COVID, we all read that wine consumption and, well, frankly, alcohol consumption in general soared. Did you
It
see that?
did. It did. Fortunately, the wine business was an essential business, which kept going.
Uh-huh.
But we had our best year ever during the pandemic, largely because a lot of people stayed home. They drank a little bit more. They consumed wines at the store, or bought wines at the store, and then consumed them at home. So yeah, it was. It definitely. We had the wind at our back during COVID, which unfortunately a lot of people did not have the wind at their back.
And did that surprise you?
It did. It did a bit. But we're retail focused, so as consumers stayed home and then shifted their buying preferences to the retail market, it helped us a lot. But yeah, now though, fortunately, the world's coming back to a more stabilized environment.
So has that changed? It has changed then. It's tapered off, or it's normalized.
Yeah, the retail sales have normalized, and now people are back. They're back in restaurants. So, getting a reservation in a restaurant these days, fortunately, is
Mm.
difficult to do, largely because I think people do have some disposable income. I don't think we ultimately know what the impact of the stock market will have, but obviously, it's a little bit unsettling out there for a lot of people.
As a kid, you loved race cars. Your dad always talked about cars, and he never really owned any, which I was surprised to read. But you always loved racing. You followed racing. You followed historic cars. And at a certain point, you were quoted as saying, "You've got to either fish or cut bait and either get into it or not." You got into it in a huge way. Tell me a little bit about growing up in that environment and what led you to your love of vintage racing and cars.
Well, I did. My dad, he wasn't a racer, he wasn't a collector, but he did always love cars, and he always had. For example, I have his 1959 Porsche Cabriolet, which he bought in 1959 and kept forever. And it actually was in the garage for 40 years. I dragged it out for my daughter's wedding a couple of months ago. So he did have cars, but I was passionate always about going to the races. He would take, as a child, he would take me to the races. We'd go see the Trans Am series. We'd see the Can Am series. I mean, watching guys like Jim Hall and Mark Donahue and all of those guys it was just such a thrill for me. But the one thing I never thought, Jason, was that I would actually have some of these cars that were my dinky toys when I was a child.
The first vintage car that you bought, do I have it right? A 1957 Maserati 250 F Formula One car? I
That's
mean, that's what you started with. Like, we're going to start
that
a
is
collection. So let's start it with a Formula One car from 1957.
Yeah, a lot of my friends still laugh about that one. But I got to a certain age, and it was a point I either had to get in, and I had sort of told myself, look, if you don't have, I actually had a list of cars that I thought that I always wanted. One was a DB4 Zagato, C-type Jag, D-type Jag, 4GT, and a 250 F Maserati. And I started my hunt for one of those cars. I just said I have to have it, and I set a deadline to get one of those cars in a year. And I ended up, the first one that I was able to get my hands on was a Fangio car from team car from 1957.
So you also developed this enormous passion, this love affair with events such as Silverstone or Goodwood, and those very historic events. But you felt that there was something lacking. If we go back now a few years, tell me about the development and the mindset behind creating Velocity.
Well, we created Velocity because there was no automotive racing event in North America where you invited the amazing and great cars out of private collections and then put them on the track. There was no forum to do that. And there was all kinds of historic racing in America, and they all exist today. And their model is a little bit different. And that is, how many cars can I get on the track, which is great. Everybody can participate. But I was concerned as I watched all of the great cars move into private collections, and a collector, probably isn't going to put his car at risk if he's really worried. Too many cars on the track, too many drivers that may or may not have the right credentials. So I wanted to bring all of these great cars back. And the model's different, right? It's not about how many cars you can get on the track. It was about how do we get unbelievable quality cars and how do we give collectors confidence in bringing them to the track. So one of the things that always bothered me, it didn't bother many other people, but it always bothered me, was when you went to the track, you couldn't get good food. The paddock looked like it was, everybody unpacked with a stick of dynamite. And if you were trying to educate a young person or a friend or a girlfriend or your wife, it was such a helter-skelter mess that I said, why can't we organize this and have a wonderful event with great food, a place to relax, place to watch the races? You could bring your whole family. You could bring a 5-year-old to an 85-year-old, and everybody had a great time. And there was nowhere to do that in America. So that was the beginning of the idea about the Velocity Invitational.
And American Goodwood, if I may.
Yeah, look, I mean, Charles March got it right. He got it right from the beginning. I happened to be in London. It was probably 18 or 19 years ago, and I read in the newspaper about this event. It was going to be the second event ever at Goodwood, and I got on the train and went down, and I was just astounded. The interest, the great cars. There was as many great historic cars in the parking lot as there
Yeah.
were in the paddock.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, these people, this is amazing. And then there was good food and everybody was having a wonderful time and there was entertainment. And I thought, why can we not do this in the United States? And part of the reason was the current model was just, entry fees, and our model is different. It is, how do we build a great spectator base, great cars, and then the sponsors will come. So that's the model we're trying to build. I will tell you, it is a battle.
Well, you
It's
didn't. You even on the profit and loss side, if you were running a vineyard, you'd say, well, that for the first vintage didn't go so well, right?
I would say the first vintage did not go so well. The second vintage did a little bit better, but not that great.
And then
The third
COVID
vintage,
happened.
we're going to find out. But
Right. Right.
it's as there's a lot of competition for our hearts and minds, and until we can really establish ourselves. So we're now in our third year. We do have significant momentum around it. We have a ton of sponsors. We've got McLaren and Zinger. We've got all kinds of amazing supercars and historic cars. So, I think we're making headway, but nothing is easy. I'll tell you that.
We had Zach Brown on this program last year, and he talked about his affiliation with this, how much he loved it. And Rob Dickinson, as well as a singer, has obviously is a poster boy for the same movement. But 2019 comes around, you go to Sonoma Raceway, and you set up the Velocity Invitational, and all of a sudden, I mean, it looked great. You had white picket fences, you had the food, right? You had the setup that you really wanted. How did you improve upon that for year two?
Well, look, our goal. So the first year we were lucky. We had Mercedes out, and they brought one of the Lewis Hamilton cars, and we ran that, and we broke the track record, and we did have picket fences and green lawn and what have you. So ultimately, but we also had some skeptics about, should I come? Should I not come? Should I bring my cars? Is it worth, digging my Ferrari GTO out or my short wheelbase or my McLaren, whatever? And once everybody saw and came and enjoyed the experience, we kind of hooked a lot of the great collectors, fortunately, and they've been just amazing. So the way we expand and make it better is we continue to bring great cars. We had the Mercedes 300 SLR, the sister car to the Moss Jenkins car, at the show last year. It was just extraordinary, and we ran it on the track. We didn't race it, but we did run it at very high speed. So every year we want to bring more and more of these great cars out of collections, and whether it's a public collection, the Peterson's been unbelievable in helping us. This year we've got the Juan Gonzalez F1 collection coming. Last year, uniquely, we had James Hetfield's
Mm.
collection of custom cars. So the whole goal here is it's really about entertainment, and there's not one car that I think, people walk up and say, I just came to see that car. Once you show everybody the different elements, it's just fun. This year we've got some amazing rally cars from Dirtfish, and and they will come and they'll demonstrate, 5 of the most historic rally cars. So, I think every year we want to continue to entertain, and I think we'll continue to do that.
It's amazing too, because what you do is you provide an education level, right, for the attendee. And you mentioned the young folks who are also part of the program as well, or just family members who can attend. You had 7,000 people the first year. You doubled it in year 2. And where will this year hit?
I don't know. I think, we're hoping probably we hit about 13,000 last year. I think we're hoping to, improve that by 30 or 40% if we can. But it is a little hard to tell. It's not sold out yet. I wish it was. It's not, but we're continuing to, continue to develop and build, and we're seeing many more sponsors come and join as well, which is really wonderful.
You actually, in the first year, I want to go back to that Sonoma event. You personally, you had a couple of highlights. A gentleman named Tom Price loaned you a 250 GTO to actually race on the track, and you finished third.
I know. I should have finished first. I should have changed the rules since it was my race. Yes, it was really well. Tom, first of all, Tom is one of the extraordinary car collectors ever. He has a firm belief, and I think I probably learned a lot from Tom, which is people want to see these cars on the track at speed. And let's try to show everybody how they would have appeared if they were at Le Mans in 1962 or 63, or whatever the year happens to be, whether it's a Delage from 1938. But having the privilege of I can't tell you the day Tom called me and he said, I want you to run my GTO at speed with anger. I was flattered and terrified all in the same moment. But we had a lot of fun, had a great race. And then I ran it again last year in Monterey, and then Tom has asked me again to drive it this year at our event. So it's just extraordinary to be able to get a spectacular car like that on the track, tangling with E-type Jags and Astons and what have you, because that's exactly what it looked like in period.
What does it take for a car to qualify for the Velocity Invitational? Rules are pretty simple, right?
They are very simple. But I think we are now the only race in the world that has these simple rules, which is the car has to be original. It has to have raced in period, and it cannot have been modified out of that particular era. So it's very, very straightforward. But what we see is every race they make an exception. Somebody's friend has a car that they created or what have you. And we've just been very disciplined about it and said, if the car is not 100% original, now it doesn't mean it hasn't been in a wreck somewhere and rebuilt or what have you, but the car has to have provenance. It doesn't have to have won Le Mans, because we're not trying to be too exclusive, but it does have to have real race history in period. And of course, the more important the race, the better.
There's been a lot of talk about auto shows changing, maybe even dying to some extent. And we've had some folks here on the program who've been part of the teams that have assembled really large auto shows through the years. We're back from the Detroit Auto Show. But auto shows are changing in a way that, or have had to change in a way to adapt to the consumer interests. And there's been a lot of talk of having more events like this, the touch and the feel and the experiential. I would guess that you're at the forefront of some of that. In other parts around the world, places like South Africa, there's been the Festival of Motoring that's been put on. And of course, we know all about Monterey Car Week. Is this the future of car shows? Is this where, even just to keep the cultural aspect of the vehicle intact, things like this have to happen?
Yeah, Jason, look, I think that is exactly right. You think about it, and when I talk to OEMs, the language we talk in is, how do we get people in seats? How do we get them to actually see the car, see it moving, hear it, or drive it? At our event last year, you could come. I think we had 8 Porsche Taycans there, and you could actually, all you had to do was walk up, sign up. I guess you probably had to give them your driver's license and an insurance card, and you could take a Porsche Taycan out on the roads of Monterey. So we do think that's the future. We think car companies will want more and more people in the cars to see them move, hear them, and actually, be able to participate, in some sort of action, excuse me, event with them. So yeah, I think, we haven't gotten very far with the OEMs yet because they've been under a lot of stress, particularly through COVID. But we have all the great supercars. I mean, so we've got, McLaren and Lamborghini and Zinger and Hennessy and a lot of great cars. But what I'd like to see is more of the OEMs participate with us, and it will come. It just takes time to get them totally involved.
You have a goal. The goal for spectators walking away from this event, actually, you have a couple of goals. One of them is they get the opportunity to look at cars that are in private collections, which of course everybody loves because they're oftentimes behind a door and or or in a vault. In the case of the Peterson. But you also want them to walk away saying, I now understand the development, the technology, the history, and you want to create a fantastic experience. I have that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the way we thought about it from the very beginning is, how do you discuss the evolution of speed? Because I think everybody has some kind of interest. They have a car story back in their history somewhere. I mean, whether it was, carpool in the neighbor's Mustang or whatever. Everybody has a car story they remember, and they may not be a passionate, car geeks like we all are, but they do have an interest in. And our goal here is to help educate everybody on, the beginning of technology. And I always go back and I say, a lot of people don't have as much interest in like 1930s cars anymore. But when you consider where the technology started from there, and even back then they had magnesium blocks, and because they were trying to figure out what lightweight metal could you use, they were supercharging cars in the 30s and running them on methanol. I mean, that's almost the same as when you think about a Formula One car with carbon fiber and hybrid, and they're running these engines at 18,000 RPM. So our goal is to show this progression, but have it demonstrated with the real cars in period.
We've had Gordon McCall on the program as a guest. We had him in August, and he's a good friend of the show. He created something similar with the Quail, the motorsports gathering that's a part of Car Week. And of course, you have Porsche, which created Rennsport, which returns to Laguna Seca in 2023 with a similar notion. So now you've got, like the wine business, you got some competition, right?
Yeah, I don't really consider it. Well, first of all, Gordon McCall, I mean, he really kind of created a couple of the very, very original ideas to engage with the consumer, whether it was the Jet Center event during Car Week or creating the Quail, and he's been very involved in motorcycles. And I think, like him, we don't consider any of this competition. We consider this, how do we create environments where spectators will have an unbelievable time and sponsors can showcase their wares. So I think we're of like mind that there is plenty of opportunity for consumers, spectators, sponsors to upgrade the experience for the guest.
Are you a keeper of car culture?
When you say a keeper of car culture,
are you an advocate? You're obviously an advocate, but is it partly your role now to keep the flame of car culture burning bright?
Yeah, I think everybody's worried about it, right? Because
Yeah,
as we move
a lot of talk of
into cars that don't make any noise, I think I'm hopeful that we're going to see synthetic fuels. We're going to see carbon neutral, maybe carbon neutral internal combustion engines at some point. But I will tell you, when I think about the history of the car and the mobility it gives individuals wherever they are, they can be in the US or Europe or Asia or India or wherever. Um, the the mobility of the automobile, I don't think will change. And I think that's one of the unique aspects. Now, some of the newer ones might not have as much sound. Um, but as somebody said there, the first race was when the second car got built. Um, and there's probably some truth to that. And not everybody's gonna take the bus. So I think it's going to continue. I don't know that we all know what the future looks like for cars. We know that obviously electrified vehicles are going to be very important in the future, but I think we're going to see them race. We're going to see them compete, and then we may even see, as I said earlier, internal combustion engines that are carbon neutral, which I think will be a milestone for the industry. And I know it's very early days to accomplish that, but I think I do want to keep the flame going, but I tell you, I don't think it's going to be difficult,
Yeah.
honestly.
And in fact, what's interesting, Jeff, is that we could come to a point where these final internal combustion engine vehicles that are being produced right now become those 1930s and 1940s vehicles that you just referenced earlier.
Yeah, sure. That's probably correct, right? There's always going to be some kind of history here, and as we continue to develop technology, I think people are going to continue to be surprised. Obviously, there's self-driving cars, but not everybody wants to probably ride around in a self-driving car. I mean, I get it that, if it's late at night and you've been at one of our wineries, at the self-driving car will be the perfect solution to get you home.
Yeah, that's well said. Who attends Velocity who we might know from sort of mainstream, mainstream media, or more the Stars with Cars section of the program?
Well, I guess I can't, I'm not 100% sure if a lot of these great collectors that are there, and we probably have 5 or 7 of the greatest collectors in America there. So you have to come to find out who they are. But the folks that, of course, the stars that we do have coming, Zach Brown, of course, will be there with a number of the most historic McLaren Formula One cars. They're going to actually have the brand new Artura there. That I can't remember, either Mika Hakkinen will be driving it, or Pato O'Ward, who's their current Indy champion or car driver. But we'll have some pretty exciting folks there. Mario Andretti is coming, so it'll be fun to see him. He'll be on the track. He's got an incredible following, and but beyond that, we attract a lot of great collectors because it's a place where they can bring their super rare cars and feel comfortable getting them on the track.
And what do you want the owners to take from this? I know I asked you what you want the spectators to take, but what do you want the owners to walk away with?
We want the owners to walk away with the fact that they have a place to come and showcase these cars. I mean, one of my mantras is, you never actually own the car. The public owns these amazing cars. You just happen to be the caretaker during the interim. And it just strikes me that there's an obligation to bring all of these cars back. It's a little bit like the art collector that that keeps the Picasso in his living room, but only invites his other friends to come and see it. To me, that's just incredibly selfish, and I respect the privacy of a lot of the collectors, so we don't advertise who the cars all belong to. But we do we don't hesitate to ask for specific cars, for specific programs from collectors.
And as you look to the future, how big can this event get? How much bigger can Velocity get? What are your goals and ambitions as it relates to it?
The simple one is to break even. That would be the first place to start. And and we're well on the way to getting close. But I will tell you, Jason, it has taken quite an investment to get here, and it's 100% out of passion. I don't know how big it can get. I think once we get more OEMs involved and more sponsors, it theoretically will take on a life of its own. But ultimately, we'd love to see through the gate 30-40,000. So
Mm.
and I think we can do that, whether it's at Laguna Seca or at Sonoma Raceway. But we've been asked to look at other venues around the country as well, because nobody's
Yeah,
really doing what we're doing.
I guess that leads me to another question. Why could it not happen in other parts of the country?
It could. It totally could. It could happen in Detroit. It could happen
Mhm.
in Montreal. It could happen in a lot of different places. I think we'd like it to get enough scale here in the West that we can go ahead and expand beyond that.
And what's interesting too is that you're asking people to bring vehicles to your area at a time when the historic season is considered over. I mean, Monterey Car Week has sort of been the bellwether at a certain stage, but from the Midwest, the East Coast, or the West Coast, they're coming in and they're adding another event to the calendar, and that to me proves that there's a strong interest here because they're going out of their way to say we want to show these incredible cars in a very safe and fun setting.
Yeah, and we've gotten great support from a lot of collectors. And when I say collectors, that doesn't mean everybody has 200 cars in their collection. I mean, there is a number of amazing car enthusiasts that have one or two amazing cars, and they are more than willing to bring them out and share them. And one of the things that we've done is give access to all the spectators, get a lot of access to the cars, the drivers, and the owners, which I think is another unique element.
One of the things you said about this year's event, which I thought was kind of funny and interesting, you said when asked what makes for a successful show this year, you said more wine, more food, and more picket fencing.
Right,
So you've
right.
got more of all three. Do I have
This
that
year
correct?
we've got more cars, more picket fence, more lawn, absolutely, and
Yeah,
more
and
wineries.
and more wine. What's in your own personal collection right now? Let's talk about yours for a minute. What do you hold right now?
I'm kind of a Maserati guy, so I've got the 250F, which I bought. That was my very first car. Then I lusted over the Maserati Birdcage, 1960. So I've added that to the collection. I've got another Maserati that's under restoration. It's a 350S. But I'm a little bit eclectic. I've got a 19. I used to go to the Trans Am races, so I've got the 1969 Parnelli Jones Boss Trans Am car, and then I actually have got something even more current. Since I couldn't they wouldn't put me on the list for the new Ford GT supercar. Um, so I got an opportunity to buy one of the 5 Le Mans 2016
Mm,
Ford GTs. So I've
wow.
got the Ford GT from that Ford took to Le Mans in 2016. It took second place.
Wow. You still have that original Formula One car?
I do. I do. I still race it. It stays mostly in Europe. We hope to get a grid here in 2023, where most of those Formula One cars from the mid 1950s, they all seem to be in Europe. And so our hope is that we can entice a number of the collectors in Europe to come to our event and put together a world-class grid here in America.
Well, you're certainly hitting at the right time. I don't need to tell you of the popularity of Formula One now in America as it continues to skyrocket. And Austin is upon us here shortly, and Las Vegas next year, and perhaps a trip. There's talk of New York as well. It's got to be amazing to you. You're an F1 guy, I assume.
Well, I love F1. I mean, it's been amazing, and of course, getting to know Zach, and then we had the
Mhm.
Mercedes team here in 2019. Just a fantastic group. But I think one of the most impressive things about these Formula One cars, probably from call it the the turbo era on, I mean, just maintaining and running these cars, it takes
Hmm.
4 or 5 people for every car. I mean, it's really staggering. And I think the spectators love seeing that and being able to be close to it. Has been very unique, and I think it's going to be a hallmark of Velocity into the future, where people they get to see these cars up close. I mean, honestly, if you go to a Formula One race, you really are pretty far away. You can't get close to the cars. It's very difficult to see, how amazing they are and the technology. So I think, one of our goals, is to continue to educate, and I think the call it the renaissance in the US of Formula One. I mean, when you think about it, that sport is, I mean, it's crazy in Europe and Brazil and Argentina and Australia and everywhere else. And the US is just kind of getting warmed up to Formula One. But I think it's pretty exciting, and the future is going to be amazing.
Yeah, we had Stefano Domenicali on this program as well, and Zach was our first guest on the show. It's amazing to see the passion around all of it, and I think Rush, the movie Rush, and Drive to Survive, both would heavily contribute to what we're seeing now in this day and age. And as it relates to Rush, I mean, those are kind of the vehicles that you're talking about when you talk about those vintage Formula One cars. And people forget that at that time the technology was so far advanced for the era. You look back now and you go, wow, those cars seem awfully simplistic relative to what we have today. But no, that, taken in context, they were just as significant as they are now.
Yeah, no, it's amazing when you think about the advancements in technology. And I think, some people look at racing and they say, well, doesn't that seem like a waste of time to burn all that petrol on a racetrack? The reality is, the reason cars today are so efficient is all of this, whether it was, energy recovery with brake systems or carbon fiber, that was all created in for the most part through auto racing. And I think we're going to continue to see that development. Where the electric piece of that goes in the future, whether people want to go to a race and you can't hear anything, it will remain to be seen. But and noise is part of automotive history. So you asked the question earlier, what's the future look like with electric cars and and the racing? I don't know. I don't know, but I think it's going to evolve, and maybe it's, you have all these young people with, that can't get the iPhone out of their hand. Maybe they will appreciate that the races don't have to have noise. So we'll see where that goes in the long term.
I have two final things for you, Jeff, and then we'll let you get back to the business of running the Velocity Invitational, which you are the busiest man in show business right now. But two things. What's the future of car culture?
Again, I think it's going to be fantastic. You look at the cars that are being developed, whether it's supercars, the technology, uh, electric, not electric. I just think there's going to continue to be this amazing following. And one of our goals, quite honestly, is to make sure when a young person comes, and when I say young, I mean between call it the ages of 8 and 20. We want to make sure they get to see how much history is here, and that it's not just another old car sitting over there. I want everybody to understand how we got to where we are today. And so I just think car culture is going to continue to be such an important element of a lot of people's being, and the fact that there's this evolution to electric and autonomous and what have you. It's all going to be part of it. But I think when you look at the Jay Leno and all the folks that have car shows, I mean, there's this amazing following. And I think I said it earlier, everybody has a car story, whether you're the mother driving the carpool, or the kid that remembers the next door neighbor that had the hot rod, or what have you. So I think it's here to stay, and the one thing cars give everybody is personal mobility to go anywhere.
The Velocity autonomous invitational will be interesting when it occurs.
Well, I can't wait. We've been working on that one because hopefully I want to see we hope to have a race with an autonomous car and
Mm.
analog with a driver. So we want to have the digital versus the analog, and I'm hoping we can actually get there. We're not quite there yet, but we've talked to a few folks, so we're optimistic that we can have an autonomous race at some point.
I was at Nissan's headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee recently and drove the road around in the Aria in its autonomous Pro Pilot 2.0 feature, which it's an electric vehicle that drives itself on the Tennessee freeways. It's a different experience, Jeff. I'll tell you that.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
My second question is, I asked you about the future of car culture. What's the future of wine culture?
Well, that business has been around for 8,000 years. Our industry is not without its challenges. But I think like fine cars, people love improving whether it's a car or wine or food. I think the future is bright. I mean, people are always challenged to what's the next great wine, what's the next great car, what made it better, whether it was the grapes, the winemaker, the packaging, what have you. So I think all of these industries are somewhat aligned. um, People they remain aspirational. If you can't buy that car today, come see it, because someday you will be able to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I had I looked at all these cars. I never thought I would actually be able to own one of them. And not only be able to own it, but be able to drive it and race it has just been extraordinary.
Jeff O'Neill is running one of the hottest events of the year, the Velocity Invitational at Laguna Seca in California. And he will have plenty of wine. He has plenty of wine and food and fences, white fences, and he's got a lot of cars. Thank you for being on Cars and Culture.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.